So start by just sitting forward on your chair as much as you can. As always, just be careful of your back and your shoulders. If they do start to sort of tense up, then as always, sit back. But if you can spend a little bit of time in this very forward posture, give you a sense of what you're sort of aiming to move towards. You won't always see me sitting this far forwards, and I decide halfway through the session my back's stiffening up, I will move back a bit to give it more support. But here, see if you can feel that sort of 30% of your weight in your feet. So rather than just supported by the chair, feel as though your legs are actually doing something. That means that you'll be slightly angled forwards. Your pelvis will just rock forwards a little bit. Giving you slightly longer feelings through your back and spine. And your back should feel longer, broader than the front of your body. Just allowing the front of your body, so the soft tissue of belly, solar plexus, the rib cage itself, just sort of seeming to drop slightly. You can feel slightly sort of hunched over and untidy, but it's really just to get away from this idea of straining to hold yourself upright. And the feel of this posture is the one that we want to maintain for the movements that we do. Many of the movements are done in this position anyway, but not all of them. We do have that movement of the weight and so on and so forth. But this is the sort of central position, in a sense, the central feeling that we want to maintain. I sometimes think of this as a sort of like a mooring post for a boat on the sea. It's not that we're stuck in this position. We move around it in one way or another, but we always get sort of drawn back to this. And then rubbing your hands together. Tapping over your face. Over your head and neck. Down to one shoulder, arm. On the other side. Upper part of your chest. Your belly. And your legs. And then sit back. So one of the elements of that upright posture that we want to try and maintain is the sense of completely allowing yourself to drop. And that's going to be much easier in this position with the, your weight supported by the chair. You're in this reclining position. You may still notice areas like your chest or your shoulders or wherever habitually tight. But in general, this feeling is of this sort of draining downwards, this movement downwards through your body. This gravity sort of like pulls you in to the chair. And that's the main quality that you want to try and find when we come back to the upright position again. So back to the upright position, and obviously, hips can sit into the chair in the same way, but your upper body, rather than sitting into the chair because it hasn't got the direct support of the chair, actually seems to flow inwards towards your skeleton and down. So you're left with this awareness of what I sometimes describe as this inner structure of the body, continuing to support and to continue to encourage a releasing of tightness and stiffness in soft tissue of your back, muscles and so on and so forth, the shoulders. And that awareness of that, what we might call a deeper element within our body, is useful for the movement because that's sort of where we want the movements to start from. So start by turning your head and just see if you can have a sense of the movement coming from the spine. It's only a very small movement in the vertebrae, the top of your spine. There's a gentle rotation there. And obviously muscles and things are involved, but I'm really talking about where your attention is. And then your shoulders. So over the course of practice, over the course of sort of getting to know these exercises, it's like listening to a piece of music. You just, if you listen to a piece of music over and over again, you'll start to pick up more and more subtle elements. You'll hear it in a different way. And likewise with these exercises, as you repeat them, so awareness of what's going on in the movements changes, and become more aware of these subtle changes within your body. Going forwards, the elbows are circling around, but what do you feel in your back, your sides, your chest? Hands down to your sides and winding your arms around. Elbows slightly bent. And then raising your hands, winding your wrists around, rotating from the shoulders. So moving your wrists and your fingers by rotating in the shoulders rather than just waving your fingers around. Back the other way. Rest your hands down. Now tilt forwards a little bit more. So now more of your weight going into your legs. And then gently push down as your legs expand. The legs are sort of compressed and expand, like a bendy twig or bendy piece of metal. So the downward movement is the prelude to the upward expansive movement. Similarly in your back, when your weight is back as you sink down into hips and buttocks more, again there's that sense of the springiness that pushes you back, that pushes you forwards, I should say. And then next time you're back, make a little turn in the center of your body. So that now more of your weight going into one leg. And when it does, see if you can make a distinction between the two legs. The one with the majority of the weight is the one that we would call the fall leg, and the other one will be empty. Don't think of them in absolute terms, but just feel the contrast. Turn in the other direction. And then moving around in a small circle with your head, turning in the center of your body, so drawing your head and the shoulders around. Change direction. Then come back to the center. 1 foot, push out. Heel should go down, then your toes. At the end of the step, this knee still a little bit bent. Pull back. Again, your leg expanding and push out. On the other side. Planting the foot. Back to your original position. Hands to your sides and turn palm forwards. Bird folds its wings, tilting forwards. Now, leave your arms out in front, come back and just let your arms swing slowly after the shoulders, the fisherman casting it. Whereas with the last one, arms went independently moving forwards and backwards. Here, imagine your hand being held back and then released. And then somebody's gently got hold of your fingers and they slip out and swing. So I can only do this with one hand because of the back of the chair, but just to show you, the pelvis tilts forward, my weight goes forwards, shoulder goes forwards, my arm follows. Then everything is reversed back the other way. So this is fisherman casting net. It's more going forwards, and this time leaving your arms out in front, but push back so your hands are drawn over. So you're rolling the ball in towards your chest. Let your hands drop down and forwards again. As I've demonstrated before, I'm not lifting my arm. If there really was a ball there and I lifted my hand, I would lose contact with the ball. So what I do is I keep my shoulder in the same position, but I move the rest of my body. and then I'll let the elbow drop. It really does feel as though you're pulling on the ball. So this is a useful exercise to establish that feeling of your arms being moved, because the image of the ball strongly suggests that our hands stay in position and we move our body to move the ball. And this is an element that we want to try and maintain in all of the movements that we do. You may also become aware through this more economical movement of other sensations in belly and chest, a kind of rising, expanding movement. So even if to start off with you were feeling that you didn't get quite as much movement as you were, you will get a lot of that back as that becomes more an integral part of the whole process, with the whole of your body expanding and moving your arms for you. And this time, turning your hands palm in. Next expansion, pushing your elbows out. So pigeon spreads its wings. Opening in belly and solar plexus and chest. When you come back, your hand comes to here. Don't pull your hand right back. It's going to be both sides again, of course. You get this nice sort of, again, expansion from belly, solar plexus to chest. That order of progression is really the one that works in all of the exercises that we do. So pigeon spreads its wings. One more time. Changing to pushing wave now. Yeah. Coming back, elbows going out again. So a little bit of that opening. The belly, solar plexus and chest. Easing forwards. We're not trying to lift our arms. What happens is, as we go forward, our elbow comes in, and look at the shape of my arm. As I go forwards, if I push my elbow forwards, my arm will swing up because it's attached to my shoulder. So try and avoid doing something like this, lifting your hands and pushing forwards, or lifting as you go forwards. Just let this natural shape in your arm, the movement of your weight through your legs, up through your back and into your shoulders. Position your arms forward. As you get more familiar with these movements, you can practice various ways of developing the movement. One rather nice one, I think it's very useful to think about this with the very simple exercises like this one. It's got a complicated pattern. But as you sit back, you maybe have an idea of something that you're pushing against, or maybe just the shape that you want the arms to go into, and just let your body flow forwards. And then the same kind of idea, coming back, roll your fingers into a hollow fist. This time your arm does change shape. Here is the shape. If it was going to stay in that shape, the punch would be upwards, but you let your elbow open out as you go forwards, and then it bends in. So it's almost like the spiraling movement in your arm as you come back sort of absorbs some of the kind of arm itself. And then open your fingers, turning your hands out. After this one, go back to the pigeon spreads its wings, doing these last three movements in a little sequence, so that we can begin to compare the subtle changes and differences between one movement and another. The forward and backward movement is a constant. Remember, each movement has potential to produce, make us aware of subtle changes in the pattern of movement within our body, patterns of expansion and contraction, of opening and closing. And it's useful to focus on those, because what we find is if we do that consistently, eventually they become the thing that moves your arms, not the other way around. Much of the flowing quality of Tai Chi comes out of that change. One more round of this. And then moving on, open your fingers, turn your hands out. They drop down slightly as they come back. And as you wind them around, they just naturally arrive in front of your hips. One more time, coming back and forwards, and just finish off by winding back again, bringing your hands into your lap, turn them palm down, polishing the table. Now cast your mind back to this feeling of the upright posture that we looked at right at the beginning of the class, the kind of qualities that you found in it, and see if you can somehow maintain at least some of those qualities while moving significantly outwards and then drawing back. So one last time. And then turning your hands palm up, gentle pressure down through feet and hips, back lengthening, rooting down. So it's very subtle in the chair, but we're looking to initiate all movement one way or another, from lower down and from deeper within our body. So switching your focus of your attention away from simply on your arms and hands, but into those subtle changes that we train ourselves to begin to recognize. Or just changing now to the wild goose. Same idea though. Those feet and hips. You can't actually see this happening, of course. Makes it more difficult to follow. But it's almost like I'm not expecting you to do this, but I'm roll forward slightly, more of my weight goes into my feet. And it's almost like I'm doing this. I'm standing and then coming back. And then standing and coming back. So you don't do that. But that's the sort of dynamic that we're looking for. It's very, very subtle within the body. Same thing here. You go forwards, drop your hands down, go back into your hips before you push up. So unlike the previous two, this is a slightly different way of doing this to the standing version where we would go straight up and down. The reason we go forwards is just to allow space for our hands to swing in front of our knees rather than getting stuck. But then we need to come back, we sink into the hips and we push up. And then down through, coming back, pushing up. Sometimes you can actually, with this one, I can actually feel the expansion in my body working that much more, perhaps because the coming back really gives it an emphasis. Good. Now, dragon plucks the stars from the sky. Expanding, contracting on one side, expanding, contracting on the other. One more on each side. Yeah. And both hands in, pressing up, and drop it down. Push out. And staying slightly in front of your body. Let's check that you haven't fallen into a very common habit. I'm not quite sure why we do it, but we do want to pull our hands back. We keep that longer, broader feeling in our back. And it's very sometimes used, not so often these days, but is that your chest has a concave, slightly curved in feel to it. And remember that a lot of these statements are in a way corrective. So, you know, sometimes people really puff their chest out. So when it comes to being fairly flat, then it feels concave. Yeah. 1 foot out, knees still slightly bent, scooping the sea, looking at the sky. Very carefully, as your hips drop back into the chair, drawing your shoulders up, and again that expansion through the belly, solar plexus, and chest. You may find that you get to here and you can just go back a little bit more. But it's quite tricky. If you go too far, as I have done, in fact, it's quite strong too strong on the back really. It's also quite difficult to come forwards again. So it's really just imagining this line from your toes up to your shoulder, just sort of expanding, rather than thinking, I've got to go back a long way. You might not go back at all, you might just come to the upright position, or you may go back a little bit further. But just trying to feel that expansion and contraction in the front of the body, almost like you've got a thread of elastic from your toes to your forehead. Just stretching it out and letting it contract. One more time. And then from here, make a loose fist again with your hands going forwards, and let that movement pull your arms over. It's quite a strong swing over. Again, notice how my arms go out. This helps to open up my chest. My chest then contracts, helps with the movement, bringing my arms around. Again, that nice long feeling through your back. One more time. So inside, scooping the feet, looking at the sky. and then grasping the tight. One more time. Feet back parallel. And just sit back into your right hip. Hold the ball. Heart in the Wild Horses main again builds from feet and hips. With expansion in your body, pushing your arm out, and then the turn in positions your hand. Come back into your right hip. Sink into the hip and then turn and move across to your left. The next time we'll introduce a bit of step in, so step out with your left foot, heel, toes, move your weight forwards into that foot and come back. As you turn now to hold the ball, you can bring that foot in, move across. As you turn, just feel how this hip is sort of the line between it and the shoulder extends. And so it'll have an effect of helping you to just move the foot. I exaggerate, and this is very exaggerated. If I turn here, then you can see this leg's already being pulled in. So there's a connection there. And then again, very exaggerated. If I do this, you can see how this leg is moving. So as I turn here, the leg will move. The little turn just stimulates that connection. So the center of our body links not only to our upper body, but also to our feet and our legs. I'll come back to that when we get around to the standing exercise. One more on each side. Good. So now, once again, rubbing your hands together. Tapping over your face. Over your head and neck. Onto one shoulder and your arm. And the other side. Half your chest. Your belly. And your legs. And pushing your heels up. activate the muscles of your legs. And then going around in the circle. Back the other way. And standing. As always, you can use the chair to offer some support sometimes when we're doing these out that way, so I don't have to keep bumping into it. But sometimes it's useful to do that. I'm going to start differently. Otherwise, I won't be able to cover what I want to cover. Start with both stance. So feet hip width apart. Have your right foot forwards, and begin to transfer your weight. Now, ideally, this particular movement is done with our hips and our shoulders facing forwards. I'm not too worried about that, but actually, there is this tendency to turn, and the tendency, unless something gets in the way, will be for your body to turn in the direction that your foot is pointing. That's quite natural for us. So you could try both ways. We don't want the turn to go too far. I just want you to recognise that it's a possibility. And of course, when we do something like Wind Blows the Willows, we choose to turn the other way. So we can turn in both directions. It's just that the more obvious way to turn is in the direction of your feet. So now, when you go back, turn your front foot out a little bit. So now as you go forward, you'll tend to move towards your right. And notice how that helps to just bring your heel up. This hip coming around pulls on the heel. This is all very exaggerated in the way that I'm doing it, by the way. And then I turn to your left, and that raises my front toes. Sometimes it's quite useful to do an exercise quite big, even though in reality, normally it will be very subtle. I'm trying to illustrate something that is happening within the body rather than something you can see. So it can be useful because it gets a bit precarious. I turn too far, I think my posture's going out. Having the chair here can be quite useful, so that you become aware of these connections from the center of the body down into the feet. I'm going to move this out of the way because it's there. So the movement, the orientation, the center part of your body actually helps you to begin to move your foot. So as I said, that was very exaggerated. It's actually, if I did this now and I stepped in, I'd fall over because I've turned too far. So it's a much smaller movement. And from the outside, you would barely see it. But it's what you feel inside your body. So the more subtle connection really is the one downwards from the center of your body. We can recognize the connection from hips up to our shoulders and down to our arms and so on, so forth. But the center of the body really is the part of the body. If we're thinking about this idea of the whole body moving as one unit, then this central area between hips and waist is really key. So if you're exaggerating it, do be careful, because, as I said, too big a movement will throw your body offline. I can be here and I'm comfortable on one leg, but the more I turn, the less stable I'm I'm going to be. Good, and shake out. So this adds a dimension to our stepping, and to the feeling of connection we have with our feet. But then try this on the other side. So left foot forwards to begin with. Standard sort of bow stance, weight transfer. As I said, ideally, this particular exercise at this point is done with shoulders and hips facing forwards. I generally don't worry too much about people who are slightly out in this. You don't want to be too far out. Some movements, of course, do require an active turn in the center of the body. Others, it's much more subtle. So we can begin to recognize this as we train our awareness to be more in our body. Now just raising your toes and your heel. And you can turn the front foot out, just to give you that little bit of extra turn. In connection from hip down to your knee, from knee to your heel. And stepping in. And then stepping through either forwards or backwards. Recognizing that the foot that's doing the step in, and the leg that's doing the step in many ways was much more like your arms, because it hasn't got the sort of resistance at both ends like the one that you're resting on. And then changing direction if you haven't done so already. Bringing your feet parallel. So this is an interesting sort of thing to practice. What you could do, as I said before, is you could use some support standing next to the wall and just play around with this idea. I think with a lot of movements that we make in Tai Chi, we start off quite big, and as we get more used to them, they become smaller. It reminds me a bit of learning to write. I can remember writing out really big letters, and you gradually learn to do them smaller as the shape imprints itself on your body and mind. Now have your right foot forwards and a few rounds of fisherman castanet. So this is straight forwards and backwards. Do one more and then make the change into wind blows the willows. So you go back. Now you turn away from the direction of the foot, and that can help the front toes come up. You have the front foot turned slightly out and the heel coming up. So it's really one movement here. Your center goes forwards and turns, And because it goes forwards and turns, there's a knock-on effect up the body to shoulders and down into arms and down through our legs into our feet. And then stepping in. Maybe in this position, raising your foot. Recognizing that this may sort of throw your posture out, you may start wobbling around, so be careful with that. I found, just shaking out now, I found when I started doing that exercise, that if I used a chair or used something for support, I could get here. And I could really sort of play around with this and recognize what wasn't quite working and kind of analyze it a little bit. Have your left foot forward, fisherman castanet. And then wind blows the willows. Beginning to raise toes and heel. And this connection to the center may help you to avoid a very common problem, which is that we often lean forwards to move the leg. You don't need to lean out when you've got that little bit of a turn there. Stepping in. And then, if appropriate, just raising the leg. If that feels too precarious or inappropriate for some reason, then simply don't do it. And step through. Dragonfly skims the water. Changing direction. Go back to your chair. So in all sorts of ways, this center part of our body really becomes a key point of focus, and we get used to bringing our attention into that part of the body, for the rooting down, for the stability, for the quieting of our attention, and so on and so forth. And when I use phrases like returning to the mountain and talk about the watch point and so on and so forth, this becomes the kind of physical location. When we root down, it's this part of the body that we want to sort of feel as though is sitting on the ground, almost like you're squatting. and so on and so forth. So coming back to the basic sitting position, whichever way is comfortable for you. Your hands drop down to your sides and embrace tiger, return to the mat. And your arms move out from that central area and are drawn back in. And again, that feeling of just sort of everything flowing down into the center of your body and down into the ground. One more time. And rest. Okay, and then open your eyes. Okay, well that went very quickly for me. Thank you very much, everybody, as always.